Just checking now to see if the microphones are on and working. Can everyone hear us? All right, great. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I want to introduce the Mayor of Stillwater, Ted Kozlowski, who is going to do a better job of welcoming you here tonight. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Well, we'll give it a shot, but thank you so much for coming to Stillwater today. It's an absolutely beautiful afternoon. As a resident and, of course, as the mayor of town, I'm very happy when we get to show off our town and our beautiful river right behind us. It's definitely the perfect setting for this conversation tonight. I've been looking forward to it for a long time, and I was out on the river today. I actually skipped lunch and brought a friend of mine up north who had never been on the river, grew up in St. Paul, and I got him up to the High Bridge, and he was just like, I mean, he couldn't believe it. He could not believe that this has been in his backyard for this long, and he'd never seen it. And I promise I won't tell anyone else from St. Paul where that is. But it never gets old to me living on this river. And I came to Stillwater accidentally. I was born in Toledo when I was a kid. My parents got divorced when I was about 5. And my mom and I and my sister left Toledo to drive to San Francisco. That's where we were going to get a fresh start. And after about 12 hours in the car, we landed in Lakeland. We stayed with a friend just north of the bungalow. And my mom's a jogger, and she ran into town. She ran into Stillwater, and she came back and said, "Kids, you have to see this town. We're staying here." And I'm like, well, what about, I have a surfboard. I'm ready for San Francisco. And so we get in the U-Haul, we drive into Stillwater, we go down here by Lowell Park by the flagpole, and I'm looking at this river, and I'm like, "Mom, can I swim in this river?" Now, I came from Toledo, where we have the Maumee River that occasionally would catch on fire, right? Like, the idea of swimming in a river never crossed my young mind. And she said, "I don't know." And so I went up to an older gentleman that was sitting on a bench, and I said, "Excuse me." I'm like, "Can I swim in that river?" And it was a gorgeous July day, and he looked at me like I was from Mars. Like, of course you can swim in that river. And that was shirt off in, and I've been doing that ever since. My second question should have been, what's Minnesota like in February? Because we found that one out kind of the hard way. But it to me, it kind of illustrated when I was out there today, the idea, we are very good at screwing up rivers. I think we've proven that. The river that I lived a stone's throw away from in Toledo as a child, you would never consider fishing, swimming, doing anything in that river. The protections that this river that we've enjoyed for this river you can attribute the beauty of this river to those protections. We have to protect these things. I think everybody agrees that we have to protect these rivers. And it needs to be lasting. And so I'm very excited that we're having this conversation. It wasn't until much later, I assure you I can bring this back to Mr. Mondale and everything, but I was about 12 years old, and my awesome stepdad got appointed to something called the St. Croix River Boundary Area Commission. And I got the longest answer. This was Governor Purpish appointed him to this. And I asked the question of, "What's that?" And it was about a 30-minute answer, but that's when I realized I started to learn about the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. That's when my stepdad explained to me about what then Senator Mondale had done to protect our river. And it's been about 25 years in the making, but when he told me about Mr. Mondale and the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, I'm like, I must thank this person. So, Mr. Mondale, thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our Master of Ceremonies, Mr. Don Shelby.
Thank you very much, Mayor Kozlowski. Thank you very much, everyone in the room, all of you representing various interests along the St. Croix River. And a special welcome to former Minnesota Governor Arne Carlson in the room today. Thank you very much for being here with us. Mayor Kozlowski, I was confused that Mars, Toledo, I can understand the person's confusion. The event is sponsored by the Friends of Washington County with co-sponsors the Friends of the St. Croix Boom Site and the St. Croix River Association. So thank you to our sponsors and co-sponsors today. And thank you to the Hamlin Center on the Environment. Education videos being recorded tonight and will be used in a number of different ways. So be on your toes, know that you're on television, make your questions specific and sound very professional because people are going to see this. After we hear from our speakers, we're going to have a question and answer session, and that's what I'm referring to. And so there are cards that are available on your seats. You probably have them in your hand by now. If not, get up and reach under your fanny and then find them that you set down on top of them. And then I will tell you, you can address each of these questions to specific speakers or to a general subject. And the people of the Friends of the Washington County and the Friends of the St. Croix Boone site will collect them at the end of everyone's talk, at the end of everyone who's getting a chance to speak tonight. And be sure to indicate if you have a specific person that you would like to have answer the questions. We'd like to also thank Water Street Inn for doing such a marvelous job of providing a site for us today and such a beautiful view outside the back. There are refreshments, rather, throughout the Water Street Inn, and if you feel at any period of time that you need a stiff drink, you can just get up and walk outside to the deck or any place inside the bar, and the Water Street Inn management tells us that it is absolutely perfectly fine with them that if you bring the drink back inside the room with you. I want to tell you a little bit about tonight's forum. We have some wonderful speakers for you tonight, but we're not here to talk about the past in any regard. This is not a forum to raise your ire about things that have happened in the past. We're talking about what is happening in the future. And some things have changed on the wild and scenic Riverway in recent years. There's a huge new bridge just down the road. And some of you are for that bridge, and some of you have been opposed to that bridge. Some of you undoubtedly have mixed emotions about the bridge right now, but we're not here tonight to complain about the bridge or promote the bridge. As our primary speaker tonight told a newspaper reporter just a short time ago that the bridge is done, and there is absolutely nothing that we can do about it at this point. That principal speaker that we're talking about right now is a man who has been an incredible friend of the St. Croix River over the time. And we're going to talk about that. He's going to speak about that. We're also going to talk about the Hubbard decision, that it does raise questions about the river and the future of those people who build and live alongside the river. What does it say about what is happening along the river today? And what does it suggest about our desire and our ability to keep the St. Croix River wild and scenic? That's what tonight's conversation is going to be about. Now, it is my distinguished honor to introduce all of the speakers, but particularly so our very first speaker of the evening, who will bookend what is happening tonight. He will open and he will close with a summation of what we have heard and the questions that have been asked and the future of the St. Croix River. I have introduced this man on a number of occasions, and it becomes increasingly difficult because his resume just keeps expanding and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I could be spending the next hour just telling you what you already know, everything you already know, because if there is one individual in the state of Minnesota to whom no one needs to be introduced, it is the man who is coming up next. He is, though, let me say this, among all of the things that he has been, the former Vice President of the United States, Senator of the United States, the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, and active in getting some wonderful people put into office, and starting out as a very young man doing that. But he has also learned a lot of his lessons in those hallowed chambers of that upper body in the United States Senate. And just across the river in our neighboring state, Senator Gaylord Nelson was one of the individuals who, working with Senator Mondale at that time, thought that it would be a good idea to protect this place as a wild and scenic riverway and worked diligently to get that passed. And his future after that is crystal clear to everyone. Not only was he the Vice President of the United States, but he was Ambassador to Japan, extraordinary, Ambassador Extraordinary Plenipotentiary, if you're keeping notes, and also Special Envoy to Indonesia, and has continued his remarkable work with nature. And so I would like to introduce the man in this following way. Favorite son of Minnesota, a friend to humanity, a friend to this river, a friend to nature. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce now the Honorable Walter Mondale.
You're going to get in trouble doing that.
I've been in there enough.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, very nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Don, for that very, very kind and extended introduction. I loved every word of it, and afterwards, let's have that drink you talked about, and let's go over it again. When I came here tonight, I wasn't sure if I should wear a tie, but I knew Don Shelby would be here, and I guaranteed he'd have a tie. Sure enough, as soon as I walked in, there he was. As you know, Don is not only a gifted public spokesman and administrator, but he's a committed environmentalist. As you watch his career, where he shows up, where he tries to help, Don is right there trying to protect our blessed nature, and I salute you for that, and we truly appreciate it. Mayor Kozlowski, thanks for your, he didn't leave, did he? There's a smart mayor. He gets out of there before he gets in trouble. Tell him I had good words for him, will you?
Went to get a drink.
I went to get a drink, yeah. Followed Shelby's advice. There you go. Anyway, Mr. Mayor, thanks for your kind words and for your leadership. To Chris Stein, the wonderful park director of our wonderful river, a classic example of the remarkable role that the U.S. Park Service plays in issues like those we're going to talk about tonight all over the country. I've been, and Chris, God bless you. I've been around the federal government for a long time, and I think the agency that never disappoints you is the U.S. Park Service. They're always good, they're always valued, and we appreciate it. Keith Parker, the DNR director for this region, thank you for being here. And with you tonight is Molly Shadeen, who worked with you, who steps down in about a week, and she has been the guardian angel of this river for all those years. Let's give Molly a big hand. Where are you? Yeah, don't forget us, Molly. Karen Housley, Senator Housley, thank you for coming. Thank you for your leadership on the, is it called IPL? A wonderful, wonderful addition to protecting the river. You were at the center of that fight, and we thank you for that leadership. Thank you. And Senator Katie, am I supposed to eat it? Katie Sieben, Deputy Majority Leader of the State Senate. I didn't know if I'd see either one of you today after that long session. There you are, alert, big smile, happy. When it's over, tell me what you're smiling about, will you? I love the Siebens. I've known them all, including your grandfather, and I really appreciate the work that you perform for all of us in the state Senate. We're here tonight to talk about this magnificent river that's right out here. I can tell by looking around this room, including interlopers like Arnie Carlson, that you're here because you love the river. Many of you live along the river. Many of you have been around here for years and know all the nuances connected with protecting this marvelous river. And I salute you, and I don't come as an expert, I come as someone who loves this place. I mean, just when I got in the car and headed toward the St., I start feeling better every mile. I just feel a little bit better than I did before. And then you arrive and you look at the river, and it's unmatchable. It's just remarkable. And it is a blessed gift to all of us. And I hope that hey Mike, I hope we do everything we can to make certain that we handle this river with wisdom, with justice, with courage, because it takes courage. I had an interview the other day with the St. Paul paper, and I said something that I've learned the hard way. Perhaps you're all seeing it. When you try to protect something like the beauty and the magnificence of this river against a strong interest that wants to do something specific, a bridge, a power line, any number of things that we've seen, you know, it's not a fair fight, because you're standing in the way of progress. You're talking vague stuff, and they're talking real stuff. But, you know, unless we start winning those fights, what we're rejoicing about today will slowly disappear from our lives through what I call a strategy of nicks and cuts. A little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, and then one day you wake up and it's just like all the other rivers that we've fled from as we made our way out west. The reason for the National River System, the Wild and Scenic River System, was to reverse that by protecting the rivers that were still protectable, trying to get there in time before they'd been exploited and looked like the other rivers. And there were signs along the St. Croix of a lot of things that were underfoot. And I think we passed it just in time. The river was still largely, at least the northern part, largely undeveloped. If you go above Namakogon, it was it really yet pristine. I heard a story today about two guys told me that when this bill passed, their neighbors said they didn't like this bill, but so that they told them Humphrey did it. And so I got off scot-free. So I was hoping Humphrey was around. I'd like to tell him that story about how he's responsible for what he does. There are challenges, as you know. The Park Service is having its budget clipped, efforts to clip its powers. The state is under pressure in terms of budgeting. Many people don't believe in this law. They should be free to do as they please. And that is a good American principle. But the reason for this bill was to include among the things that people think about protecting a precious natural asset, that would be gone if we didn't correct it, so that it does hold the hand of unbridled individualism. It does say, do as you please, but don't hurt this river. We've got a lot of things coming up. We'll talk about them later tonight. Chances for reforms and the rest. One of the ideas I like comes from John Herman, creating a national or a rivers interpretive center, St. Croix River, and maybe locating it here in Stillwater. We have one up in River Falls, not River Falls, Thief River Falls, at least I'm a faller, but it's up there. It's not on the Minnesota side, and as you see the growth and development of this river, I think it would make sense to try to have a cooperative interpretive center down here, and you agree with that too. He agrees with it. So I would like to see something like that develop over the next few years, and I'd be glad to do what I can to help. Well, we'll have a chance to hear from many others. You'll let me say a few words at the end. I'll grade each of your remarks. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Now, I would like to also tell you now you can, and I will do this after every speaker, if you have any questions at all, you can write them down and then pass them forward. What I would like you not to do is write or try to pass your questions during the time that somebody else is speaking. So if you have questions for the Vice President, please write them, and they will be picked up in the aisles and pass them down to the end of the aisles. Now, the next person that I am going to introduce is the person who has been talked about quite a bit already tonight, and he is the superintendent of the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. He's been the superintendent since 2008. He's been in that position, and like all good people with the NPS, he has worked in dozens and dozens of places. Started out as a park ranger in 1981. So if you're doing your math, that's 34 years that he has been in the business of protecting our parks and opening them up and hoping that people will take advantage of the great natural resources and parks that we have available to us. He's a great steward of the river. He's a great protector of the environment, and he is a government official, and he has to do whatever that budget allows him to do, whether that is great or whether that is small, and it operates in a very fluctuating manner, as you all understand how government works in times of tight budgets and in times when we are flush. So I would like to introduce to you the superintendent of this incredible river and its park system, Chris Stein.
Truly an honor to be here. Good evening. And I'd like to second Mr. Mondale's congratulations to Molly Shodine for all of her years of service on behalf of the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway and beyond. Thank you, Molly. You indeed made an incredible difference for this river, and we will miss you dearly. Thank you. Tonight, I will address political will in ways appropriate for a federal bureaucrat. I will also discuss basic legal protections and share the Riverway's 5 goals. Please know that my comments are focused on the federally protected zone of the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway, from the boom site just north of Stillwater for 225 miles north into the wilds of Wisconsin. When Congress passed the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act in 1968, 8 rivers were immediately designated wild and scenic, including our beautiful St. Croix. I too want to thank Mr. Mondale and Senator Gaylord Nelson for what you guys did. Thank you very much. And of those 8 original rivers, only one was also designated a unit of the National Park Service, our river. Many of you know that the National Park Service manages sites throughout the United States, 407 sites to be specific. And of those 407 sites that we manage, only 59 have the National Park title. Others have other titles like National Monument, National Lakeshore, National Seashore, National Recreation Area, National Memorial, National Battlefield, National Memorial, and many more, 25 titles, including National Scenic Riverway. But in reality, despite our National Scenic Riverway title, we are as much a national park as the better-known ones like Yellowstone, Yosemite, and the Grand Canyon. When we have to make decisions affecting the St. Croix, it is the same management policies that guide federal actions in those great parks that also guide our actions at the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. In the federal zone of the St. Croix, the national park, I would argue that without question, there is the political will to protect the river. And we also have the legal protections necessary as well. Forgive me for wearing my hat inside. But when I put on this hat, that should signify to you that I am in the forever business. National parks are forever. And we get that forever mandate from the 1916 legislation that established the National Park Service as a bureau of the Department of the Interior. The August 25th, 1916 Organic Act, as it's called, of the National Park Service gives us our mission, and that is to conserve the scenery and the natural and historic objects and wildlife therein, and to provide for the enjoyment of the same in such manner and by such means as will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. The forever business. It's like motherhood and apple pie. It's good stuff. Since passage of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act in 1968, 48 years ago, Congress has provided an annual appropriation to the National Park Service for protection of the St. Croix. Currently, our budget is about $4 million a year. That's commitment. I recently asked the park's budget analyst for financial records going back to the beginning of the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway, and she easily could get me the records going back to 1980. Remember, we were established in 1968. If we dug deeper, we could get the other records as well, but I said 1980 is good. Going back to 1980, the United States Congress has given the National Park Service $87,682,000 to manage the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. And I would say that's commitment. That's right. Now, saying that, we need more, don't get me wrong, but there has been commitment over the years. As long as we have a national park along the St. Croix, the executive branch of government, who I work for, will do as Congress requests, and we will protect this beautiful river forever. Our primary goal at the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway is to keep the water clean. This is a requirement of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, which calls for clean, free-flow rivers to balance a system of commercial rivers that had been established. But I will tell you that keeping the St. Croix River clean is a tough job. And the reason being, it's simple. In your traditional national park, like a Western national park, you have a mountain, or 2 or 3 or more, and you have a square boundary line around that mountain, and everything within that square boundary line is a national park and it's protected. And then when it rains and snows, the water runs outside the park boundary, and keeping the water clean is someone else's problem to worry about. While the water is in the park, the national park keeps it clean. At the St. Croix River, it's an inverse mountain relationship. We are the centerpiece of the 7,700 square mile St. Croix River Valley. When rain or snow falls within the watershed, all that water flows downhill towards the beautiful centerpiece, the St. Croix River. And the National Park Service has no authority on land use policies or land use actions outside of the very skinny boundary of the National Scenic Riverway. So how do we keep the water clean? How can we possibly keep the water clean? Well, we do it with partnerships, like the DNRs, Minnesota and Wisconsin, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the counties, other federal agencies like U.S. Geological Survey, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, watershed districts, organizations like our Friends Group, the Good St. Croix River Association, also the St. Croix Watershed Research Station, and many others. And these groups together, they form what's called the Basin Team. And I've sat through some of these Basin Team meetings, and I will tell you that all those organizations around that table are very committed to keeping the St. Croix River clean. And I just want to thank the Basin Team right now for helping us achieve our goal. Our second goal at the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway is to protect the values that Congress asked us to protect in the first place. These are known as outstandingly remarkable values. They include such things as nature, culture, history, geology, recreation, scenery. And when we have to make a decision affecting the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway, we make that evaluation based on these outstandingly remarkable values. When the National Park Service is asked to evaluate any development project that affects the better banks of the river, we look at these ORVs, as they are called. And a classic example is the new construction taking place across the river 1 mile downstream from here. The last time the National Park Service was asked to evaluate that project, we made the determination that the bridge would have an adverse and direct impact on the scenic and recreational values of the riverway, the values that Congress asked us to protect in the first place. How could a $700 million bridge not have a direct and adverse impact? And I'm not getting into politics here. This is whether you support the bridge or not. It's going to have an adverse impact. But as many of you know, there is a much greater concern that looms upon us. And this concern is the invasive fish known as Asian carp advancing up the Mississippi River. If Asian carp make it to the St. Croix River in significant numbers, you know that our way of life along the river will be changed forever. Not only will these fish change the native ecosystem, but they will change recreation on the river and the economy that supports that recreation. The negative impacts by Asian carp have the potential to make the St. Croix River Crossing project look small in comparison. The third goal for the St. Croix Riverway is to engage citizen stewards at all levels: residents, visitors, children, volunteers. Although the river is protected as a national park for future generations, for our children and for their children's children, no one government agency stands a chance alone at protecting these very vulnerable 225 miles of the federal zone of river without the help of the citizens who live along the river and the people who come here to recreate. Our riverway courses through 2 states, 10 counties, and dozens of communities. We all need to figure out how to significantly engage the people who live here in the St. Croix Valley in meaningful ways to help protect this precious water resource, their river, our river. Next year, 2016, is the 100th birthday of the National Park Service, and we plan to celebrate this once-in-a-lifetime event. Our overall goal for the ongoing celebration is to connect and create the next generation of park visitors, supporters, and advocates. President Obama recently announced that in 2016, every 4th grader and their family will be given free entrance to national parks so they can learn about our national treasures. Also, Secretary of the Interior Sally Jewell has announced that she'd like to see 1 million volunteers supporting public lands by 2016. And that's across all of the bureaus in the department. I can tell you right now that the National Park Service, we have over 250,000 volunteers that are helping us. Not at the St. Croix, by the way, but throughout those 407 units. At the St. Croix, there is tremendous potential for us to engage more youth and volunteers in our work, and we will. The fourth goal of ours is to educate people about the fact that the Riverway is a unit of the National Park Service and a wild and scenic river. It is our hope that someday everyone who lives in the St. Croix Valley knows that this Riverway is a national park. Part of our centennial celebration is called Find Your Park. Raising the visibility of our national treasures is a major goal of the National Park Centennial. Leading up to 2016 and beyond, we have a great opportunity before us to help achieve this National Park Awareness goal. And following on the heels of the National Park Centennial, in 2018 is the 50th anniversary of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. So we're going to have a continuous party for a couple of years. What better time than now for our leaders and our citizenry to recommit themselves to the original purposes of that great environmental legislation of almost 50 years ago, the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. We have a gem in our midst. Have you ever thought what the St. Croix River would be like without the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act? Wouldn't be like it is today. The fifth and final goal of the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway is to support our many good partners who demonstrate the will to help us protect the river. Those partners are too numerous to name here tonight, but I do want to especially recognize the National Parks Friends Group, the St. Croix River Association, and the other sponsors of tonight's event, the Friends of Washington County and the Friends of the St. Croix Boom Site. I'd also like to give a special shout out to the St. Croix Valley Foundation, who does a lot of philanthropic work for us. And our colleagues at Minnesota DNR and your great team of state employees, thank you so much, Keith. Thanks to all these groups, plus many, many more. Every day I have the great fortune to spend a good amount of time working with these partner groups, and it's the will of the people behind these groups that energizes me on a daily basis with their passion of place and strong desire to do the right thing for our very special St. Croix Valley and its very special centerpiece, the St. Croix River. In closing, as a National Park Ranger, I have had the great opportunity to live and work in every corner of this great land of ours. I remain forever convinced that we have something extra special going for us in this corner of the nation. I am also convinced that it is our own national treasure, our very own national park, our very own St. Croix River, that contributes in a significant way to that specialness. So thanks again.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Stein. And once again, I'm asking you to, if you have questions for the individuals, then to write them on the cards and then pass them down at the end of your row. I have the pleasure of next introducing a director of the Central Region of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Keith Parker is with us tonight to speak specifically to the issue that a lot of you have on your minds tonight, and that is the role of the DNR and what has happened specifically since the Hubbard decision by the Minnesota Supreme Court. What does it suggest about our ability to protect the wild and scenic St. Croix, and is the legal framework that we understand and have worked under for years still sufficient? And perhaps the toughest question of all, and the one that you have to consider this evening, is do we still have the political will and the political resources to protect the St. Croix River? Keith has a long and interesting career. He's been in his current position as director, and those directors not simply hold a position of management, but they They do manage the activities and the goals and the mission of the DNR throughout their respective regions, including the day-to-day management and responsibilities, including outreach to communities and acting as a representative of the Commission office within the region. Director Parker has served the DNR for the 4 years and 4 months, and